1,000 years. Now the kingdom heart shall be mine.
No, you won't. I'm going to stop you.
I have lived over 1,000 years, young man. How are you going to stop me?
Yes, with the power of friendship.
What? Power of friendship? What is it supposed to mean?
Friends?
And how exactly are you going to do that?
Yes, I have friends.
To make this keyblade, we will use EVA foam as the main material, and it is advised to use harder EVA foam for this build. First trace a pattern onto a 1cm foam and 2 on 5mm foam, then draw a 1cm gap onto 1cm foam. This will be used for the metal insert. After that, use an aluminum and bend it according to the gap. It will be used as the inner structure. Because it's small, lightweight and stronger than my will to live. Now bring back the template and make a cut around here. This will be used for layering. Next is cut 2 pieces of this on 3mm EVA foam. Because according to the model, this side is slightly thicker than the other side. Next, I use sanding machine to sand the edge so the thickness can blend in nicely. After cutting out the gap for the aluminum structure, first sticking an additional 3mm layer by using contact adhesive. Contact adhesive gives more working time and has better coverage compared to other bonding agent. Just simply apply on both sides and wait for it to dry. When both sides are dry and become tacky, stick them together slowly and make sure the edges are all aligned nicely. After that, use contact adhesive again and stick the outer layer, which is the 5mm layer, onto it. Next, flip over to the other side, remove the foam inside the gap that was only used for holding the shape. Then apply some contact adhesive onto the aluminum tube and place it into the gap once the contact adhesive is dry. After that, flip over the other side and repeat the same steps. Then for these parts, I use 5mm foam for both sides and 4mm for the middle. Only this is 3mm on both sides and 4mm at the middle. These are all 70 degrees hard EVA foam, so this part will be rigid and strong enough to hold itself. Then use contact adhesive on this as well. 5mm will be in the middle and then 4mm will be on both sides. Apply contact adhesive on both sides and wait for it to dry. After that, stick them slowly and make sure it is all aligned. Repeat the same step and make sure to distinguish the 4mm foam in the middle. Once it is done, it should look like this. Now get the template and cut this part out. Trace the pattern onto this and do the marking. Then cut them out and make sure both sides is cut accurately. I don't have bandsaw, so I'm doing the manual way, which is cutting from both sides. If things like this happen, just glue it back will do. After that, make some marking at the side to avoid confusion when gluing them back. This will ensure when gluing all the parts back, it will align perfectly. Last but not least, I also separated few parts from the green guard. It is basically because it will be easier to sand them this way. If you decided to use my template, I also mark the parts need to be separated red. Next is marking the sanding line. For this side, it will only be rounded a little bit. The final template is slightly different from what I'm using here, and I even marked all the sanding line in blue. And then I realized there is one part of the wing has to be slightly taller. So I cut these on 5mm foam and stick them on with contact adhesive. After marking all the sanding line, then it is time for sanding. To do sanding, a mini rotary tool is being used. I first used 60 grit rough sanding bit just to carve the shape. Then I used 240 grit sanding bit to smoothen the surface. Sanding this is a long progress. It even took me few days just to get everything sanded nicely, but you will see how it turns out in the end, and the result is satisfying. Now when all the pieces are ready, I use contact adhesive to stick them back into one piece. And now it is time to assemble the rest. I first use silver gel pen to make the marking, and then I use super glue to stick onto it. For the wing part, I also use super glue to stick all the pieces together. It is because super glue dries fast, and it is also stronger than my will to live. And just when I think the blade is ready, I realize I forgotten this, so I quickly get the template ready. I cut 2 pieces of this out of EVA foam. Then I mod the template and cut one piece of this out of 1cm foam. After that, I use contact adhesive to sandwich the 1cm foam with 5mm foam. Then it will look like this. After that, I cut the inner side of the 5mm foam inwards so it can fit onto the blade. Then I mark the position on the blade and stick it on with super glue after I sand it. Finally, the main structure is all ready. Before we start painting it, don't forget it has accessory as well. I stacked 2 pieces of 5mm foam for the star and make it 1 cm thickness in total. I also max line the cut at the edges because we will be sanding it later. As for the feather, I use hard 4mm foam. After rounding off the edges, it is ready to add more details onto it. I use a wooden skewer to poke the hole at both sides, then glue all of them together. Now I use a 3mm half round foam and use a skewer to push it through the hole. Then flip it over, make a U-turn, push the foam to the hole beside it. Cut the extra foam and push the other end to the first hole to make it into a ring. After that, use super glue to stick the foam to keep everything in place. Next, I poke hole at one end and put some super glue to enhance it. Then I put this ring onto it and make sure it can fit through. Now let's move on to this. I also poke a hole at the end and use super glue to enhance it. Then I draw this line onto both sides. And use a knife to make a few cuts but do not cut through it. After that, hit it with a heat gun so it will open the cut. The last thing before painting is making this hole. I first use skewer to poke it from both sides. Then I realized it is 21st century, I can just use a drill. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. After that, I first use water-based pen and fill it into a spray gun. Use it as a primer to prime the keyblade. At the current step, it is the final step to do filling as well as sanding. So I use a regular wall filler to fill the uneven holes and use sandpaper to smoothen the surface. After that, I switch to my other spray gun and use automotive silver paint to paint the base color onto the keyblade. And it should look like this afterward. Next, I first use masking tape to mask this part. And then because this keyblade has a lot of gradient, so we will rely a lot on airbrush. I first start with the blue. The blue color that I use is Special Effect Blue. And then I mix the blue paint with Special Effect Red to get purple color. Lastly will be gold. After that, we'll be masking again. And this time, we'll be masking this part. Then I first paint this part with Special Effect Blue. Next, I mix the blue with a little bit of silver to paint this part. And I also use the same color to paint the star. After that, I mix gold with a little bit of silver to paint this part. And of course, the star as well. Lastly, mask over this part and paint it with gold. After removing the masking tape, because I'm tired of masking so much and spray painting, so I only mask this part with masking tape. And then I use black acrylic paint to paint it instead. This time I'm using liquid text mask black, and because it is spray painted surface, so it will take a few layers to cover it. After painting that, I also use smaller brush to add some shading to give it a little bit dimension. Also, not to forget this, I painted with white acrylic as well. Finally, I use 3 cotton ropes to break this. When I feel it has reached the length that I want, I use super glue to glue both ends to keep it in place. Then I use scissors to trim the extra rope. Now move this away and use a later. I cut a tiny piece and drew something like this. Then it is being used to wrap the other end. After that, use a blue string to string over the hole and trim it. Then use super glue to stick both ends together. Lastly, attach the feather and the star onto the ring. And it is done.